Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday morning, where we react to the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Good Monday morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. What a way to start the week with us, right? Well-meaning, great people. You're doing our best. And then with a bunch of evil corporate broadcasters and the people they are stenographers for, all the politicians. What a nice way to start off the week.
Yeah, it's great that they spent so much attention talking about Israel's latest massacres.
Well, for those who don't pick up on sarcasm, Katie's using some dry humor there because they did not. Friday, Israel commits one of the worst atrocities so far of its mass murder campaign, killing well over 100 people. The exact count is even unknown because the bodies were so destroyed by an Israeli bombing. Palestinians sheltering at a school in Gaza. And as we'll see today, it got pretty much almost no coverage on the Sunday shows and, very little coverage overall in U.S. media. And the way they still cover it, it's still with like passive language. It's not even clear from headlines who did it. And of course, imagine if there had been, say, even a fraction of that number of Israelis killed in a Palestinian attack, it'd be around the clock. But over 100 Palestinians wiped off the earth at a school, pretty much silence in the U.S.
And also, it's important, I think, to remember, not that I support extrajudicial assassinations, but Israel is capable of that, as we saw of through their assassination of Hania, and yet they choose to do these very imprecise bombings. So even their lie of going after Hamas people is not true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in this case, it was people who were gathered for prayer at dawn. And Israel brags about how precise its intelligence is. It knows who it's striking. So then they knew that they were bombarding civilians gathered for prayer, which means there was the most number of people in one location at a moment, because when you gather for prayer, you do it communally. So that's what this latest massacre was. And how many more will there be before this whole thing, before Joe Biden and Kamala Harris decide it's finally time for a ceasefire, which I don't know at this point, maybe that will never come.
Right. Yeah. So sadly, I think there will be more, which is a terrible thing to say, but it's true.
All right. Well, let's kick it off with a update on the polls, because look, it's amazing what can happen when a guy who is completely out of it and deranged drops out of the race. All of a sudden, we got a close one, and this is the state of the polling right now between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
The difference a few weeks makes. Before President Biden dropped out of the presidential race, that was 3 weeks ago today, Democrats were discouraged. Republicans were on a roll, and it looked like Donald Trump was well on his way to winning back the White House. Now, a new New York Times Siena poll of the battleground states likely to determine who will win shows that the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz ticket has the momentum, leading Trump-Vance by 4 points among likely voters in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. That's a dramatic change after what the Times is calling the worst 3 weeks of Donald Trump's 2024 campaign.
I mean, I got to admit, I thought that Kamala was more unpopular than Biden. I thought it was a bad decision. I'm not speaking morally, ethically. I'm speaking politically, strategically, but I think I was wrong. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen on Election Day, but when you can form full sentences, it's very formidable.
It makes a huge difference when you can form full sentences, and you can, walk without needing visual prompts to guide you how to walk up to the podium, as Joe Biden does. Yeah, no, I'm not surprised that this is the worst 3 weeks of Trump's campaign, because Trump's campaign was relying on just Joe Biden getting out there and defeating himself. And that's a pretty good strategy, because that was going to be a safe bet. But with Biden out, now Trump is scrambling, because also now he is facing off against a woman who's also a person of color, which also triggers his brain. And he can't stop calling her dumb and questioning her ethnic identity. And as passionate as he may feel about those issues, it's not really the foundation for a solid presidential campaign, I don't think. So these are bad weeks for Trump, and we'll see if he can recover.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And I thought he'd get more. I also thought he'd get a bigger bounce from the assassination attempt.
Yeah, no, imagine that. You survive an assassination attempt in a really dramatic fashion, and you can't even get a bump in the polls. I mean, if I were Trump, I'd be pretty upset about that too. But I think he only has himself to blame. We're getting some audio feedback a little bit. So
okay.
Katie, maybe while we play this next clip, you can reconnect your microphone. And let's go to that now. So speaking of Joe Biden, remember him? He's like the guy who's still the president, who's no longer really relevant because he dropped out of the race, and everyone's kind of just forgot about him and forgot about the fact that he still is overseeing, the country with the most powerful military in the world, which is simultaneously fueling 2 wars. But I think everyone's so ready to move on from Joe Biden that already he's just not getting very much attention, and no one really cares what he has to say. But he's still there. He's still the president. And he sat down for his first interview since dropping out of the race, which is quite a long time, actually. It's been almost a month. It's been, 3 weeks. Anyway, and he was asked about that whole massive catastrophe he's feeling in the Middle East, which constantly threatens to escalate because he refuses to pressure Israel to accept the ceasefire deal that he says Israel's already accepted. So Joe Biden was asked about that whole thing by CBS.
Ceasefire possible before the end of your term?
Still possible. The plan I put together, endorsed by the G7, endorsed by the UN Security Council, etc., is still viable. And I'm working literally every single day and my whole team to see to it that it doesn't escalate into a regional war, but it easily can.
How reassuring.
Wow.
How reassuring. Okay, I'm working every day to stop this from escalating to a regional war, but it easily can. Yeah.
Right.
And doesn't he inspire confidence? Like,
yeah.
Given that his own handlers and donors and political, aides, leaders forced him to drop out of the race because they felt he couldn't handle a presidential election. Doesn't it then inspire confidence that, or not inspire confidence that he's probably not going to be able to handle or prevent this from escalating into a regional war?
Yeah, it really inspires confidence, and I like the way that he has plans. Right, he's putting his plans together. I'm glad he's putting together a plan. I mean, he's been putting together a plan for getting tough with Israel, or having tough conversations, I should say, with the Israelis. That hasn't turned into anything. So if this does break out into a regional war, it will be in large part because of Biden's enabling and arming of Israel.
I'd say it'll be 100% because of Biden, because he could have put a stop to this a long time ago. As Israeli officials admit, they need the U.S. for everything, for weaponry, for the cover to continue carrying out this assault. I mean, how many times has Biden vetoed something at the UN Security Council? So he could have stopped this, but he won't, because he's got, as he said, an emotional attachment to Israel. A few months ago, Aaron David Miller, who's like a veteran State Department official who worked on the so-called peace process, which basically was an excuse for Israel to keep colonizing Palestinian territories while claiming to negotiate peace. That's what this peace process was. He was asked by the New Yorker, like, hey, do you think Joe Biden feels the same level of empathy toward Palestinians as he does Israelis? And Aaron David Miller said, if you're asking me, does Biden feel, as strongly about, Palestinians as Israelis? No, the answer is no.
Yeah.
So what Aaron David Miller was saying is that Biden is a bigot. Okay.
Right.
So we have a bigot in charge of policy, which means he's letting Israel massacre Palestinians and even have a wider escalation, because that's what Israel wants. That's why it's attacking Iran and Lebanon, killing people in both countries, because it wants an escalation, and it's counting on Biden's support. And despite Biden's claim there that he's working on trying to avoid it, again, I don't think we can really take that seriously given his record.
And he also simultaneously says he has a plan, like he has a big hand in this, but also makes it seem like it's out of control, like it may happen.
Yeah, and what is his plan? His plan is claiming falsely that Israel has accepted his plan.
Right.
Even when Netanyahu was like, no, I do not accept a ceasefire. We're going to keep going until Hamas is destroyed. So Biden even lies and says Israel has accepted his plan when they've been forced to recently admit that Israel has not. And by the way, Biden also has endorsed Israel's rejection of his plan, because back in October, Remember that interview that we played the clip a few times where Biden was asked by 60 Minutes, like, hey, like, do you think that 2 wars is maybe too much for the U.S. to handle at the same time? And Biden was like, of course we can handle 2 wars.
Yeah.
He was like indignant at the possibility that the U.S. couldn't fuel 2 wars. He, in that same interview, he also endorsed Israel's stated goal of eliminating Hamas. So basically, Biden's already endorsed Israel's stated goal of like not stopping until Hamas is totally destroyed, which means in real life destroying Gaza, because that's what Israel is actually doing under the guise of destroying Hamas. So, yeah.
Also, he has said that that he endorses that goal, a goal which Israeli military officials themselves had said is not attainable, which is destroying Hamas. I mean, these are not peaceniks or refuseniks saying this. These are people who are actively high-ranking officials in the military.
All right. Well, very hard to find, coverage of that whole Middle East catastrophe thing on yesterday's talk shows. They were more focused on, I don't know, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz and all that stuff. But Fox News is on the case with their reporter Trey Yingst, who's like basically been embedding with the U.S. military, with the Israeli military since October 7th. And he filed this report for us.
For all of us.
Shannon, good morning. A dangerous waiting game is unfolding right now across the Middle East. Israel is still bracing for an attack from Iran and its proxies, as U.S. officials are reportedly scrambling to put together a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. The key...
If you speak to anyone who's like well-versed in the Middle East, they would reject this term proxy. Like, like Hamas and Hezbollah are just Iranian proxies. They're allies right now.
Right.
To say they're all controlled by Iran is pretty ignorant. For example, in Syria, the Hamas political leadership, including Ismail Haniyeh, who was just assassinated in Iran, they broke from Iran. They actually sided with the Dirty War coalition that was trying to overthrow the Syrian government. So
bad move.
Yeah, and so the idea that they're all proxies and Iran controls everything, I mean, that's undermined by the record, including what happened in Syria, one of the worst things to ever happen to the Middle East in many years.
Right.
So anyway, but not that words matter with these people.
But also, why don't we call Israel a U.S. proxy?
Well, that's a great point, and that's a lot more accurate, because Israel cannot do anything without the backing, as we talked about, of the U.S. and the arming of the U.S. That's a great point. But they'll never, ever use that word for Israel on a corporate TV.
Date to look at here is August 15th, this Thursday, when Egyptian, Qatari, and American negotiators are set to meet. The gathering is largely seen as a last-ditch effort to end the war in Gaza and avert the situation unraveling into a wider regional conflict.
And so what has Hamas just said about that meeting to have a ceasefire? They said, we're not going to attend. And the way the corporate media is framed that is Hamas is boycotting the ceasefire talks. But if you read what Hamas actually said, is they said, like, we're done with these like meaningless performative talks, absent any real pressure on Israel to implement the deal that's already on the table. So what Hamas has said to basically to Biden is like, you have to get Israel to accept the deal that you claim to accept and that you claim Israel accepts. Otherwise, there's no point in us coming to these talks. So that's Hamas drawing a line in the sand. And if I'm making predictions, do I think Biden's for the first time going to exert any pressure on Israel to accept the deal that he claims Israel already accepts? No, that's my prediction.
Yeah, he tried to play that trick on Israel by saying it was their plan and getting them to agree to it, and Netanyahu had no problem saying that wasn't the case.
Yeah, and he also was playing a trick on us. Is it because
of course,
he knew that Israel actually didn't accept it and probably would never accept it, but he still, I think, to buy Israel more time to kill people, he went out and claimed that they had accepted it. It's kind of like what Kamala Harris called for a ceasefire.
Right.
She said, we need an immediate ceasefire. Applause. Yay. Oh my God. Yay. ... For at least 6 weeks.
Right.
Yeah. These people.
Reports indicate CIA Director William Burns will lead the American negotiating team, while U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is looking at a trip to the region this week. The X factor in the entire equation.
Oh, Blinken. I forgot about him. Remember him? He's supposed to be like the diplomat guy.
Right. The great negotiator who doesn't really negotiate.
Never negotiates. I wonder if he's engaged in a single negotiation during his time in office. Like, maybe over his like haircut appointment. He's probably
Right.
I'll do a blowout.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you like an hour and a half for that. But
Right.
aside from that, no.
He does get a nice blowout.
Is Hezbollah, Iran's largest proxy that has launched daily attacks against Israel since October 8th. The group has promised to target major Israeli
Okay, notice how they constantly talk about these attacks as if they're totally unprovoked.
Yeah, and what has Hezbollah said? We will stop launching these strikes if Israel stops bombarding Gaza. That's their only goal. And in fact, the one time they stopped striking Israel during these months since October 7th was when there was that week-long pause.
Right.
So Hezbollah observed the ceasefire, and they're just wanting that to be restored. But let's go back a little bit because he says something false here.
Attacks against Israel since October 8th. The group has promised to target major Israeli population centers in response to the killing of Hezbollah commander Fawad Sukar in Beirut earlier this month. Now, overnight.
No, they said we're going to hit military targets. Now, it happens.
Easy mistake, Aaron, to make.
Now, it so happens that Israel does, in a classic use of human shields, place some of its military sites amidst densely populated areas, like in Tel Aviv. In downtown Tel Aviv, there's like a military command that's right around a bunch of civilians. But Hamas has said we're going to go after military sites. Because Hezbollah has said we're going to go after military sites. Unlike Israel, which reserves the right to just and actually mostly targets civilians, as we've seen in Gaza. And even has a doctrine saying that they'll target civilian areas and use like disproportionate force to basically teach everyone a lesson not to fight back against us.
Right. The Da'iya doctrine,
Yeah.
Hezbollah launched rockets and drones into northern Israel in response to a targeted strike in southern Lebanon the day before. It's unclear if Hezbollah will be held back by Iran, its main funder and supporter in the Middle East. Now, an Israeli.
Notice how he calls Israel's bombing of Lebanon a targeted strike.
Yeah.
Right. Would he ever say the same thing about Hezbollah, even if Hezbollah does launch targeted strikes all the time at Israeli military sites?
Right.
No, he would not.
This is like a masterclass in how to sneak propaganda into reporting.
Defense official told Fox News over the weekend that coordination continues between the Americans and the Israelis to prepare for a worst-case scenario of a large-scale attack against Israel and the possibility of a larger war. Shannon?
Trey Yanks reporting from Israel. We will join you again live in just a little bit later in the show. Trey,
again,
thank you.
They make it seem like this large-scale attack against Israel is something like totally out of the blue, as opposed to responses against very provocative military actions, including assassinations.
Yeah, if you're going to report on, Hezbollah launching strikes on Israel, you should at least acknowledge what Hezbollah's stated goal is, which is to get Israel to respect a ceasefire, to implement a ceasefire. That's their only goal. And they have been limited in their strikes. Hezbollah could do actual damage to Israel, but they've been trying to basically avoid an escalation because they don't want to have to fight a war because, of course, they know that Israel would target Lebanese civilians and destroy a lot of civilian areas, as Israel's always done. Israel has been attacking Lebanon for over 40 years, well over 40 years. If you guys saw my debate recently on Piers Morgan, the former IDF guy got mad at me when I said that Hezbollah was formed after Israel invaded in 1982. And the IDF guy corrected me. He said, actually, we invaded it first in 1978.
Right.
Okay?
That was a great moment.
Yeah. So I'm sorry that I did not acknowledge the early invasion of Lebanon by Israel.
Yeah, that was erasure, Aaron.
Yeah.
But
invasion,
you know what?
erasure.
Invasion, erasure. Yeah. By the way, one of the ironies, or it's not an irony, it makes sense, but the Da'iya doctrine that we just mentioned, which is basically the doctrine calling for disproportionate force and targeting civilian infrastructure, that was actually developed in the Da'iya neighborhood of Beirut.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of coming full circle that's where they developed it, and now, of course, they're going to be applying it. They applied in Palestine and here. And also, Aaron, going back to what you said about the human shield, because of course nobody ever talks about Israel placing its military base in the heart of Tel Aviv, which is creating potential human shields. Unlike Hamas, which has no room or space or areas to go to in Gaza that aren't extremely densely populated, Israel has the choice of building its headquarters anywhere that aren't as populated.
100%. Yep.
But they don't care.
No,
they don't care.
No,
yeah.
They do not.
Yeah.
And by the way, so Trey Youngs there talks about how the U.S. is coordinating with Israel a response. Well, yes, the U.S. is deploying huge numbers of military forces to the Middle East to basically enforce Israeli aggression. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin just announced that he's ordered the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, which has F-35C fighters, as well on top of other carrier strike groups as well. So that's the U.S. response so far, is sending more military assets to the Middle East to help enforce Israeli aggression. That's what this is about. If Biden wanted a ceasefire, he wouldn't be sending U.S. forces to back up the Israeli government as it refuses to accept a ceasefire and continues to bombard Gaza and other areas. That's what the U.S. would be doing, but it's not. It's saying to Israel, go ahead and we're going to back you up. And so, that's why we have the escalation that we're facing.
Right. But guys, don't worry. Good news. We have more Fox News for you on Israel. And that comes from Lucas Fox.
To Lucas Tomlinson live at the White House. Hello, Lucas.
Shannon, Vice President Kamala Harris gave unscheduled remarks late yesterday where she addressed the war in Gaza and the importance of ending it soon.
Yet again, there are far too many civilians who've been killed. I mean, Israel has a right to go after the terrorists that are Hamas. But as I have said many, many times, they also have, I believe, an important responsibility to avoid civilian casualties. The president and I have been working on this around the clock. We need to get the hostages out. We need a hostage deal, and we need a ceasefire.
President Biden enjoyed some downtime.
Look at President Biden hard at work there, working for a ceasefire, snoozing on the beach.
Aaron, he deserves some radical self-care after working so hard.
Oh, he's working so hard, yeah. But look, so Kamala Harris's statement is incoherent, okay? Either you support a ceasefire and you oppose killing civilians, right? Or you support Israel's right to go after Hamas, quote unquote, because they're mutually exclusive. Under the guise of going after Hamas, Israel has been slaughtering tens of thousands of people. So you can't say that, Israel has the right to go after Hamas, but also too many people are dying. It's people are dying because Israel's killing them under the guise of going after Hamas. Now, of course, as a matter of principle, I would say Israel actually has no right to launch a single bullet, to fire a single bullet into Gaza. You don't have the right to attack a territory you're occupying and that it's trying to free itself. You have the obligation to end your occupation. But putting that aside, this has been the line for 10 months now. Israel has the right to go after Hamas, but too many people are dying. That's because there's no pressure being put at all on Israel to stop killing people. And if you say Israel's right to go after Hamas, you're saying Israel has the right to commit mass slaughter, which is what they've done under the guise of going after Hamas. So Kamala Harris, despite what there are some, unfortunately, people in progressive media who have been saying that she's different than Joe Biden, she adopted a different tone. It's complete nonsense. She is endorsing the current policy of mass murder. And she's just I don't know. Whereas Joe Biden can't speak coherently at all, she's just slightly less incoherent, but she's still just as incoherent as Joe Biden.
Right. She just doesn't stumble over her words.
Yeah. Yeah. But she just takes longer to say them, I guess. And it's and is better at a word salad. She's better
they're
at
word salads, but they're seamless word salads. They're fluid word salads. Also, I mean, if they really wanted a ceasefire and to get the hostages out, do they think that killing Hamas leaders is a good way to help that happen?
Especially the Hamas leader who's negotiating the ceasefire.
Right.
Which was the case with Ismail Haniyeh. And by the way, Ismail Haniyeh, in terms of what the Biden administration claims to want, they always say we want a path to a Palestinian state. Well, there are some people in Hamas, it's not a monolith, who have said, yeah, we would accept a Palestinian state. That includes Ismail Haniyeh.
An Israeli state. Right?
He said we'd accept a Palestinian state in the 1967 borders, which basically means a Palestinian state in the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, which for Palestinians, huge compromise. That's just 22% of their land. That's what Ismail Haniyeh said. Now, if you accept a Palestinian state in those in those borders, you're tacitly accepting an Israeli state on the other side,
right?
Which is what everyone like in the Biden administration claims they support. But because the Biden administration and the Trump administration, and everybody else, they're ultimately committed to Israel stealing as much Palestinian land as Israel wants. They will not accept even people in Hamas moderating their stance. And so they killed someone like Ismail Haniyeh, who they could have engaged with to see like whether negotiations could have resolved not just this current awful phase of the Israel-Palestine issue, but the entire issue. Rather than that, they kill him. And now they have someone like Sinwar, who's now the new leader of Hamas, who by all accounts will not accept any such compromise with Israel because he doesn't think Israel can ever be negotiated with. And there's plenty of evidence to support that view. So the U.S. policy is nothing but violence and land theft. That's all it is. Force. That's all it is. No room at all for diplomacy.
And also, we all know how little, because Israel has said that they don't want a two-state solution, that they wouldn't want two states, but they used to for a long time. And this is just another piece of evidence that they couldn't care less about that. And as Gideon Levy has said, everyone who is today for a two-state solution are the same people who, when it was viable, were opposed to it. And they're only for it now because they know it can't happen.
Exactly. All right. Well, we featured him a lot recently on the show. He is a senator. Should he be a senator in this country or any country on earth? Like, does this person have any business being in elected office? I would argue no, but I guess that's up to his constituents, the good people of Arkansas. His name is Tom Cotton, and he's got thoughts.
Oh, wait, can we finish that clip that we were just watching? Because there's some really good content that we didn't get to in the clip before. And then, thank you for teasing Tom Cotton for people, because they're not going to go anywhere now. Wilson, can we just finish that clip?
House in Delaware, where he gave a familiar one-word warning to Iran.
What's your message to Iran? Any thoughts on former President?
Well, the White.
Okay, imagine, first of all, you can barely hear him speak, but apparently he says don't. He's never said anything that forceful or direct to Israel this entire time.
I bet he feels like a real badass when he says that one line.
Don't, yeah.
Obviously, he needs confidence right now. It's been a hard time for him. Like, his whole party revolted against him.
Right.
He was threatened with, the nuclear option by Nancy Pelosi if he stayed in the race. So I think talking tough, like a tough guy, against Iran probably injects some much needed confidence. So you see that as he's strolling into his limousine, he's like wearing his like aviator shades.
Yeah.
Sir, what's your message to Iran? Don't. Oh my God. Yeah. He said don't. Yeah. Wow. He's a badass.
Right.
So yeah.
It's
good for Joe Biden for finding, opportunities for self-confidence. We all need them.
Right. We all need them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he needed that radical self-care, to get in touch with that self-confidence that's deep down inside of him. That's why you need to be on the beach.
Yeah, he needed to be on the beach, like psyching himself up for that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Practicing his don't.
But it's also like when an adult sees two kids fighting and one kid starts it and then the other kid considers like responding, and they just tell the kid responding, don't do it.
That's how Joe Biden probably sees himself. Like, as like the elderly authority figure, not the person who's like actively fueling one party as it, sets the region on fire, which is his policy toward Israel.
Right. Well, let's go back. There's a little bit more of that clip that we should watch, and then we'll go back to Tom Cotton.
Also waits Iran's response. It's Ukrainian forces taking the world by surprise, launching an incursion into Russia's Kursk region, an operation that has the support from the Pentagon with one caveat.
It is consistent with our policy, and we have supported Ukraine from the very beginning. We don't support long-range attacks into Russia.
Days before Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke at the Munich Security Conference.
If Russia further invades Ukraine, the United States, together with our allies and partners, will impose significant and unprecedented economic costs.
Former President Donald Trump insists Russia would not have invaded under his watch. He also claimed he would have made a deal with Iran.
Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. We would have gotten along with Iran. I was looking forward to it. I was fine with Iran. We hit them a couple of times pretty hard.
Officials say Iran and its proxies are not likely to launch a major.
Okay, I like what Trump says there about Iran, that he would have been able to stop them from getting nuclear weapons. This is the same guy who literally canceled the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah, like, did he forget that he's the one who pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal so he could reimpose what he loved to call maximum pressure?
Yeah.
Which basically means suffocating Iranian civilians, depriving them of, basic goods, which is the whole goal of U.S. sanctions around the world. Is he forgetting that part? Like, he's like, I was looking forward to getting along with them, and then all of a sudden I happened, to cancel this like major act of diplomacy between our two countries, and I reimposed murderous sanctions. What's the
what's
issue?
not to love? Yeah.
What's the problem?
We were so chummy. And I may have killed Soleimani, but whatever. I had to hit him hard a few times.
Yeah, and then I assassinated their top general, who, by the way, Katie, I mean, like you like to point out, he's very handsome.
Yeah.
As Soleimani, by the way, was on a peace mission to basically reduce animus between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That's what Soleimani was in Iraq to do when Trump killed him. And then Trump and his people came up with a lie that Soleimani was plotting attacks on U.S. soldiers, which is just, it was such a transparent lie. But so then before that we have, by the way, the other conflict that Biden's fueling, Ukraine. The latest with that is, as Fox News talked about, so Ukraine has actually done a cross-border invasion of its own. It's gone into Russia and it's taken some territory. And as one consequence of that, there's also a nuclear plant in Zaporizhia, which is a part of Ukraine that Russia's occupying, which is part of the nuclear plant's on fire. And both sides are accusing the other of being responsible. But that's part of the fun that's happening right now with Biden deciding to fuel a conflict rather than accept diplomacy. And I mean, it's so horrible in the Middle East, like with Israeli mass murder, that even on this show, we haven't really had much time to cover the other, Armageddon threatening conflict because it's just so bad in Gaza. But that is happening. And we saw from the Pentagon official there that they're like, we don't support strikes deep into Russia by Ukraine, but it's fine for Ukraine to use our weapons to do a cross-border invasion. And listen,
just the tip,
exactly. That's the policy. Now, of course, before the policy was Ukraine cannot use our weapons to go at all into Russia, but now it's like, okay, they can do that, but just let's not do long-range strikes at this stage. Is it reasonable to expect that red line by the U.S. will be lifted too, given that so many others have by the U.S. on Ukraine? I think it is reasonable, but we'll see. But again, we said this before, does Ukraine have the right to cross into Russia and take? Of course it does. That's what Russia did to Ukraine. Are there maybe some alternatives we could try, like talking? And has this strategy worked for Ukraine so far?
Right.
Of losing so many people and losing 1/5 of its country.
Right.
The way things have gone, I don't think ultimately this will go well for Ukraine. But the Biden policy is why not?
Right, because they care more about bleeding Russia than saving Ukrainians.
Exactly right. Okay. Well, we teased him. It's so unfair to tease him and then not show him. I mean, I feel, I feel bad. But here he is finally. You've been waiting for Tom Cotton for his deep thoughts on the state of the world.
Joining us now, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. Welcome back. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Shannon. Good
so
to be back.
You heard what the vice president said. She said she's repeatedly talked about the civilian toll that's going on with Israel and the strikes in Gaza. We got a statement from NSC spokesperson Sean Savitt yesterday on this, saying we know Hamas has been using schools as locations to gather and operate out of, but we've also have to say repeatedly and consistently that Israel must take measures to minimize civilian harm. So you've got.
So this is the classic double game of the Biden administration. So it's like, yes, we know that Israel's pretext for committing mass murder is correct. We endorse it, but they have to basically take steps to kill less people.
Right.
Rather than saying Israel has no right to bomb civilians gathered in schools, whether or not there are some members of Hamas there. Are those members, do they have any proof that those members of Hamas who, let's say there was Hamas at that school.
Even if there were,
I'm not saying there is, but unless you can show there's some sort of imminent threat, basically these Hamas members are about to detonate a weapon in Israel that's going to kill your own people. You don't have the right to just kill a bunch of civilians because some members of a militant group happen to be there. By that logic, then opponents of Israel and the U.S. could just kill a bunch of civilians if there was a U.S. military or Israeli military official somewhere in the vicinity, right? and again, I'm not drawing an equivalence because Palestinians are actually the ones occupied, and they have the right to fight back for their freedom, as opposed to Israel, which is an occupying power. So I'm not even drawing an equivalence there, because Palestinians actually have a case for violence, because they're the ones being occupied.
You're just showing the double standard.
Yeah, it's just so ridiculous. So it's like their words are an effective endorsement of Israeli atrocities, under the guise of expressing concern for civilian harm. It's so cynical.
And it's not allowed what they're doing under international law, even if there were Hamas people in there.
Yeah.
As you pointed out. Yeah.
Again, Hamas is not an army. They're not. Gaza is not a state. It's people trapped in a concentration camp who are now being targeted because a small number of people, members of Hamas and other militants, launched a one-day attack on October 7th. But that doesn't give Israel the right to then just kill everybody around them for the 10 months since. It's insane. It's this whole conversation is an act of collective insanity. We've completely dehumanized every single person living in Gaza.
This delicate balance, get this thing wrapped up, get it over with, but also act with precision to get to the bad guys. How does this thing end, and what do you make of the continued criticism that Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing this and extending this for political reasons?
Well, Shannon, Kamala Harris's comments yesterday, like her policy towards Israel for the last 10 months, just an example of how she's unprepared to be the commander-in-chief. She immediately took at face value Hamas's claims about the number of people killed.
This Chiron for Tom Cotton here. Tom Cotton, Republican of Arkansas. If you pronounce it, it's rar, right? Tom Cotton, rar. And that's rar. Like that's kind of how I feel listening to Tom Cotton. Just like nothing but like venom and malice and contempt for humanity. Like it's kind of an expression of his rar.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Tom aggressive. Cotton, Tom Cotton, rar. Yeah, and of course for him, he probably likes that. He'll probably turn that into his slogan.
Tom Cotton, 2024.
Yeah,
rar.
Exactly.
Rar. Yeah.
She immediately took at face value Hamas's claims about the number of people killed and what they were doing. Israel has to strike on occasion at places like hospitals and schools because Hamas uses them for command and control or to fire mortars and rockets.
To fire mortars and rockets, like where? Like at the invading Israeli forces who are in their territory destroying Gaza. I mean, first of all, it's not even true that Hamas does that. At least there was no evidence that Hamas was doing that at this school. But again, even if they did, it doesn't justify massacring over 100 people, which Tom Cotton, by the way, is questioning. He's saying that we don't even know how many people were killed.
Right.
But the logic is so skewed. And now he's saying also the school was command and control for Hamas. Basically, according to these people, everywhere is Hamas command and control. Every single hospital that Israel destroyed was Hamas command and control.
Yeah, there's not a single place that Israel could go where they wouldn't say, like that Israel could bomb, that that Israel wouldn't claim was Hamas centers, and that their defenders wouldn't complain were Hamas centers.
Like when Israel bombed like a clinic or hospitals, like that's command and control. Okay. All right. We'll get through it
we'll get
as
through
much of this as we can.
Civilian casualties in Gaza, no doubt, but those are solely the responsibility of Hamas, not Israel. Kamala Harris,
okay, that is such disgusting, illogical, abuse logic. Like Hamas made me do it. Hamas made me commit war crimes, and it's all on them. Like, was the response to the Warsaw Ghetto uprising all on the Warsaw Ghetto uprisers?
Well, according to Tom Cotton, yes, it would be.
Yeah.
Joe Biden, though, have put more pressure on Israel than they put on Hamas from the very beginning. Just look back a couple of weeks ago when Prime Minister Netanyahu was in town. She refused to preside over the joint session, her only constitutional duty as president of the Senate. She refused to have a meeting in public with them, and she came out and again blamed Israel for the civilian casualties in Gaza, only emboldening.
I mean, she didn't actually blame Israel for the civilian casualties, but if she had, that would have been accurate because Israel's the one causing the civilian casualties. And by the way, so yeah, she didn't preside over his address to Congress because she went to a campaign event, but she did have a meeting with him. And which is what happened on Friday. the same day that Israel massacred over 100 people at a school, Biden administration released another $3.5 billion worth of weaponry to Israel. So what is he talking about? That they've done more to pressure Netanyahu? Like, what is he talking about?
Right. It's so funny. The lies that they tell about Harris and Biden are things that I wish they were doing.
Iran and Iranian-backed terrorists. And what did you have 2 days later? Hezbollah, another Iranian-backed terrorist, shot in rockets to Israel and blew up children playing ball at a playground. Kamala Harris is...
You know, I still have yet to see it established who was responsible for that attack in Israeli-occupied Syria. Israel blamed Hezbollah. Hezbollah claimed they didn't do it. I don't know if it was a Hezbollah rocket. There's no way it was intentional that they would kill Arab civilians. They generally don't target civilians. They target military sites. So if it were Hezbollah, it would have been, it would have to have been an error. But Hezbollah says it was actually a malfunctioning Israeli Iron Dome.
Right.
I don't know, but that Israeli claim should not be taken at face value.
Right.
Naive, and she's not prepared to be the commander-in-chief.
To be fair, we did see her publicly with the prime minister. We didn't get the content of their meeting, but there are those visuals of them together. But she's trying to balance, it seems like as many in the Democrat Party are, this pull from the progressive side that wants to see this wrapped up and wants to rally on the side of what's happening to the Palestinian people. So how does this end?
But look at what's happened just in the past few days at her rally. She's been interrupted twice by pro-Hamas radicals. The first time, she accused them of helping Donald Trump get elected, not telling them they were demented for supporting terrorists, not telling them that the United States stands with Israel, the victim of the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, but that they might help Donald Trump get elected. Apparently, though, that was too tough.
If you're going to trot out that line that October 7th was the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, then you're saying that Israel was complicit in the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, because Israeli military intelligence not only failed to prevent it, even though they had warnings about it, but also on the day of October 7th, as has been documented now very extensively, Israel killed some of its own people by invoking the Hannibal Directive, fired on its own people, trying to prevent them from being taken captive by Hamas. So if you're going to use that line, you have to accuse Israel of being complicit in the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust.
Yeah. You're also admitting that Israel's not the safest place on earth for Jews.
No. Do we want more of this guy, or is that enough?
Let's see. Anything really good coming up? What else? Let me just see my notes. Anything good? No, I think we're good.
Okay. Well, we have more Tom Cotton if we want on Governor Walz, Tim Walz, and the controversy over Walz's military service. A top issue for all voters, I'm sure. We love to talk about, this happens every election, like with John Kerry. There was the whole Swift boat thing. Anytime someone was in military service, like both parties fight over over whether or not whether or not he was like a true patriot, whether or not he saw enough combat, whether he was enough of a tough guy, basically. And that's what's happening now with Tim Walz. I guess we can listen to Tom Cotton's thoughts on that. Why not?
Yeah, sure.
Iran and Iranian-backed terrorists throughout the region.
Okay, I want to make sure we get to a couple of other things. There is this issue of stolen valor. You know what this is like. You've had people question your record, your portrayal of your record in the past. It's now coming up with Governor Walz. The New York Times has a piece saying this. It took precisely no time to figure out that Walz filed the paperwork to run for Congress.
Oh, by the way, just want to mention, she kind of alludes to his getting in trouble himself. And that's because he lied and said that he was an Army Ranger, but he wasn't. He took a course in being an Army Ranger. Yeah. An 8-week leadership course. Yeah.
Well, which says to me that maybe Tom Cotton has a problem with insecurity, maybe a need to prove his masculinity, right? That's often what people do.
Rawr.
Yeah. Well, that's often what people do when they sort of portray themselves as being tougher than they actually are. And so maybe he could look at that rather than take out his aggression as rawr on defenseless people in Gaza, who obviously their slaughter makes him feel tougher. You can tell just by the way he talks.
Right.
All these people, the world, they themselves would be happier, and the world would be a better place if they went to therapy rather than ran for office.
Right. So true. Like if Hitler had been a successful painter,
Yes.
if he had
There's a
just stuck to art. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Tom Cotton is the latest in that lineage.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, let's hear his thoughts.
And submitted his request to retire months before any official order to deploy to Iraq was received, according to National Guardsmen who served with him. He'd been weighing the decision to run for Congress for quite a while. So there's been a lot made about the timeline, the fact that he had announced in February of 2005, I'm thinking about a congressional run. It wasn't until much later that his unit was officially called up. He had put in retirement paperwork. So what do you say to those who push back? Like, this is a non-issue. You're a veteran. This call for respect of other veterans, and you know what it's like to be questioned.
Well, first off, I want to say I respect the service of all veterans, to include Tim Walz, who served for more than 20 years. But now even the campaign has acknowledged he's made past inconsistent statements about his service. I think he should answer questions about those statements. I think he also needs to answer questions about his 35-year-long financial relationship with the Chinese Communist Party, someone who took 30 trips to China and took students with him so they could be exposed to communist propaganda. But more than anything, Shannon, we need to remember that Tim Walz is the vice presidential nominee. Kamala Harris is at the top of the ticket. She's the one that needs to take questions. She refuses to take questions about what direction she would take this country in. She hasn't had a single proposal since she became the presidential nominee. Well, I take that back. Last night she said that she was going to eliminate taxes on tips. So the only proposal she's had since she became a presidential nominee is to steal one of Donald Trump's ideas at a time when her administration said that they would crack down on the taxation of tips. That's why they needed $87 billion for more IRS enforcement. This is the kind of flip-flopping and deception you get from Kamala Harris, who is a dangerous San Francisco liberal.
Ding, ding, ding. If I were playing a drinking game watching Tom Cotton, I would definitely say drink every time he calls her San Francisco liberal.
DSFL.
DSFL. What's that?
DSFL, dangerous San Francisco liberal.
Oh, dangerous. Sorry. Yeah. DSFL. You're right.
No.
Yeah, totally.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love this. It's true. Kamala Harris is not taking questions, and she doesn't really have any policies yet. And yeah, she did adopt Trump's policy, his proposal of eliminating taxes on tips.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Right.
I mean, it's nice to see some bipartisanship there.
Yeah.
You know? But Tom Cotton does not want to see, obviously he doesn't really care about working people. So, you know, you'd think if you support a policy, you'd actually support someone taking that policy on as well, because you want to see the policy enacted no matter who wins. But for them, it's all about partisanship. But yeah, he does make a point. Kamala Harris is not taking questions, and I'm sure whenever she does give an interview, it will be with somebody in the media who's like friendly, which is not hard to find. But let's hope that they continue talking about policies that help working people rather than warmongering, and like talking about Tim Walz's military service, which I just don't think is a issue that most people care about.
Right.
Also,
okay. Again, like they make him sound like I would love for Tim Walz to be not as confrontational with China. And he probably is. I mean, he's definitely less of a hawk than people like Cotton. But he's also been a critic of China. In fact, he said, "I certainly was under the illusion that liberalizing trade and openness would have a significant impact on liberalization of personal freedoms. I have now seen this is not the case." He's not the China lover that Cotton claims he is.
Well, heaven forbid in U.S. politics if you talk about getting along with another country.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And that's just you aren't allowed to do that. And so I guess because Tim Walz said that once, all of a sudden he's like you know, an agent of China, just like all those protesters who oppose mass murder. According to Tom Cotton, they're all pro-Hamas. Okay, let's move to General Frank McKenzie. He is he was the former head of, I forgot, maybe CENTCOM or something. Anyway, former top U.S. military official, general leader, and he has some thoughts on the whole Middle East crisis thing.
General, we've talked a number of times in recent months, and the scenario you have flagged as the most concerning is one it seems we are on the brink of, and that is Lebanese Hezbollah entering this conflict potentially in a significant way. How do you characterize where we are right now?
Margaret, I think we are hours, maybe days, not weeks away from Lebanese Hezbollah entering this fight. and that's always been the big variable. They are the largest non-state military entity in the world, a parasite on Lebanon, but they have tens and tens of thousands.
Yeah, so he just casually throws in that they're a parasite on Lebanon. And the reason why he thinks they're a parasite is not because he thinks he has a certain vision of what Lebanon, he cares about the well-being of Lebanese, but because Hezbollah can fight back against Israel and the U.S. And so if you're someone who can fight back against U.S.-Israeli hegemony, then you're a parasite. You have to be eliminated. That's why he's saying that.
Yeah. Also, it kind of is a nice coming full circle to that theme of comparing Middle Eastern peoples to animals that we saw with, remember that great Thomas Friedman piece, Understanding the Middle East Through the Animal Kingdom?
Oh, I'd forgotten about that one.
Repressed memory.
Oof.
Yeah.
Even the name Thomas Friedman is triggering for me.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, more deep thoughts from Frank McKenzie.
Thousands of highly accurate rockets and missiles, and they can challenge Israel in a way that Iran and the Houthis, for that matter, are unable to do so. Because
there you go. That's why he thinks they're a parasite, because they can challenge Israel in a way that Iran can't, which means they can fight back. And hegemons hate people who can fight back. Therefore, they're a parasite that has to be excised. The problem is, for these people, is Hezbollah does have a base of popular support. And why is that? Because Hezbollah has defended Lebanon from Israeli aggression for decades now. And when you do that, when you fight off invaders successfully, you're going to have people who support you and see you as their defenders, because that's what Hezbollah has done. And we can't think of people who feel that way, because we insist on the right to basically wipe out and just wipe out whoever we want and control whatever we want. That's how the U.S. sees the Middle East.
Yeah,
because of their geographic proximity, because of the number of weapons that they have, and that's very concerning. I've thought all along the most dangerous turn in events would be if they chose to enter its scale. Now, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Lebanese Hezbollah, has got to make a very strategic decision on this, because he will be open to a withering Israeli counterattack should he choose to enter at great scale. And what would great scale be? Don't know. I would say if he chooses to attack Israeli population centers. I would say if if significant casualties are caused by a Hezbollah attack, that will bring the IDF back in with great force. And he recognizes that. And the last point I just make is Hassan Nasrallah and Lebanese Hezbollah are perhaps weaker in Lebanon now than they've been in many years, because of the destruction of the economy, the fact that the countries and the governmental gridlock, lots of problems in Lebanon that he has to think about before he chooses to fight Israel toe to toe.
Yeah, Lebanon's economy has been decimated, and you can thank U.S. policy at least partly for that. So, it's not entirely the fault of the U.S., but there's been a lot of looting of Lebanon's banking system. And certainly, I bet you in 50 years, when documents are declassified, just as we learn about what the U.S. did during the Cold War to places like Cuba and, throughout Central America, throughout the world, we're going to learn that there was, I would bet, an even more cynical U.S. role in Lebanon than we know, with the aim of trying to weaken Hezbollah, because they couldn't do that via democracy, because Hezbollah actually has popular support because they fought back. So I wouldn't be surprised. We always learn about these things years later. I wouldn't be surprised if we learn more about this down the line. And, our friend Ronnie Akalix covered this extensively. And, there's so much context missing from these clips. It's just, it's hard to keep up.
It's like criminal. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Should we turn to next?
Let's turn to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders went on the Sunday news shows. He was asked about Kamala Harris not having really any policies and actually reversing some of her previous policies, including her support for Medicare for All, which is Bernie's signature issue.
Policy.
Yeah. So here he is speaking to Dana Bash of CNN.
Talking about some of the policies that you care most about. She has reversed herself on some, like Medicare for All, on some parts of immigration policy, fracking. Does that give you cause for concern?
Well, look, she has to run her campaign, and I'm sure she is, talking to all kinds of people to come up with an agenda that will lead to victory in November. But I believe that when you contrast what her policies are compared to Donald Trump, who doesn't even believe that climate change is real, he thinks it's a hoax, who wants to give more tax breaks to billionaires, who hasn't begun to talk about the kind of income and wealth inequality that we have in this country, who talked a big game about taking on the drug companies, but has did nothing during his administration. I think the contrast is very clear. But
so all that's true. If you compare Kamala Harris and Joe Biden to Donald Trump, they are more progressive domestically than Donald Trump, which is a very, very low bar. But Bernie's also there basically saying that it's fine for Kamala Harris to abandon his signature issue of Medicare for all.
If it'll get her elected, is his argument.
And I guess, well, you know, actually, he's about to I'll be fair to Bernie. He's about to make somewhat of a critique here of Kamala Harris, although not directly. But why not, I don't know, forcefully advocate Medicare for all like Bernie Sanders used to do?
Right.
You know? But in fairness to him,
it's very popular.
It's very, very popular. And in fairness to him, he's about to make that point.
having said that, you know, as you may know, we did a poll. My campaign did a poll last week on some of the major issues facing working families. And what we found, not to my surprise, because it's consistent with other polls, is that the American people overwhelmingly, for example, want to expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and vision. Why? Because 50% of our seniors are living on incomes of $30,000 or less, and a quarter of them are living on $15,000 or less. Not to anybody's surprise, the American people want to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. American people want to expand Social Security. It's over 70% of the American people expand Social Security by lifting the cap on taxable income so that the wealthy start contributing. So I think the agenda that we have talked about for working people, expanding Medicare, expanding Social Security, raising the minimum wage, demanding that the wealthy start paying their fair share of taxes, this is an agenda that is not only good policy, it's what we should be doing when so many of our working people are struggling.
So Bernie, you know, good points. And I guess the question is, and I'm not saying I know the answer, but the question is like, what's the most effective way for you to promote those policies and get Kamala Harris and her wing of the party to accept them? Is it just to politely ask and suggest it on CNN? Or is it to use your base, the one you developed very successfully, historically, to actually push for them? And on the latter, he's not really doing that anymore. Like, remember, he used to talk about a revolution. We need a revolution. He's not doing that anymore. In fact, suggested theme song for Bernie Sanders. You know, we maybe put this in the useful idiots canon. You know, he's talking about a revolution. He's not anymore. So I think a good theme song for Bernie would be, "Don't you know we're not talking about a revolution?" Yeah, I mean, yeah. He's not talking about a revolution.
Yeah, Wilson, make sure you write this down and note the time code because we do have to do a record. Yeah.
But it is good politics as well.
So, Senator, do you want Vice President Harris to talk? She does talk about raising the minimum wage, but on expanding Social Security and Medicare, should she be more aggressively pushing that on the stump, on her website, as she explains to the American people what she would do?
Well, Donna, my understanding is that she is going to be coming out with an economic agenda next week. So we'll see what she has to say. But I believe, you know, during the Build Back Better period.
Better.
All right. So
better.
We're going to get Kamala Harris's long-awaited platform really soon. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
If I'm a betting person, am I going to bet that she's going to endorse Bernie's ideas? I would bet no, but hey, I'd love to be proven wrong.
Yeah. And by the way, some people didn't get our reference, thought it was a Beatles song that we were singing. No, that's Tracy Chapman.
Yeah, come on, people.
Come on, people. Yeah.
Come on. Yeah. All right. You know, remember 2016? There was like somebody stole Democratic Party emails and published them, and that became the basis for Russiagate, this whole all-encompassing thing where Donald Trump was accused of being a Russian agent. People on corporate TV couldn't stop melting down about like the invasion of the Russian hackers and bots. Well, we have a new version of that where somebody has hacked the Trump campaign, apparently. And the Trump campaign is now blaming another baddie state, Iran. So let's hear a bit of this from, what's his name? Christopher Krebs.
Oh, I love him. He's great.
He
He usually wears really bright socks, but we can't see them on this appearance.
too bad.
Anyway, yeah, that's really too bad. Yeah.
Campaign is calling on reporters not to publish anything they might receive as a result of this alleged criminal behavior. The model I think of is what happened in 2016 when the DNC was hacked and emails ended up hurting Hillary Clinton's campaign. Is that what Iran is replicating now?
It sure seems so. If you go back and you look at the Microsoft statement from Friday that talks about 3 prongs of an Iranian effort right now. One is to go after campaigns. Another is this broader disinformation effort to stoke the fires amongst society. And the third element is they went after a county election official. That is the exact replication of the 2016 Russian playbook that was outlined in the 2000.
RPB, we haven't heard that in a while. Russian
RPB,
playbook.
The Russian playbook is being dusted off once again. And again, this is in fact the Russiagate playbook, where you claim without evidence that a foreign bad guy state is responsible for trying to sow chaos, destroy our pristine democracy with all-powerful hacking and bots and misinformation, which by definition is anything that might come from a foreign state. That's misinformation. Anything we decree on TV, this is all factual. Everything here is factual. It's not misinformation. Honestly, it's too boring to continue with this. I just, it's just too boring. But
do we want to leave people on a more exciting clip? Or, I mean, we did go over, but
I would love it if the Trump campaign tries to really brush off the Russiagate playbook and like invents a collusion scandal about Kamala Harris and Iran.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Kamala Harris is being compromised by blackmail because there's tape of her engaging in a lewd sex act or something like that with an Iran, you know what I mean? In Tehran, which is, again, it sounds stupid when I say it about Kamala Harris, but this really was what Democratic leaders and every other member of Blue Anon believed for years and years and years about Donald Trump. So I really hope that the Trump campaign goes full steam ahead. Let's Iran gate the Kamala Harris campaign. Why not?
Right.
Okay.
Should we? What do you want? You want Pelosi clip or the Bell clip?
Oh yeah, we're near. Wow, we've really. This show's gone by very fast.
I know.
I think we can. Let's talk a bit about this. This race in Missouri. We managed to get the whole show without even showing a clip of JD Vance, which actually I'm impressed by because he was on every single show yesterday. But he didn't say really anything new.
Except something really funny where he's like, "Yeah, I agree with Trump that the vice president doesn't matter."
Yeah.
That was a good moment.
But he's a pretty dull speaker, and but let's talk more about what happened in Missouri last week, where squad member Cori Bush, working class person
who had formerly been homeless,
been through a lot in her life, gets elected to Congress, makes the mistake of supporting a ceasefire very early on.
But Aaron, I want to say one thing that I forgot to add this during our 4 basic food groups, which is that she actually has been speaking about Palestine for a long time. It's not just the ceasefire.
Oh, I know, but that's true. But why she really put a target on her back is because she dared to call for a ceasefire early on, like way before anybody. In fact, she was the person I think who introduced the ceasefire resolution. And remember back in like the early weeks of this, there was like a small, you could like count on like 2 hands the number of Congress members willing to call for a ceasefire, and all of them were people of color. They couldn't find one white person in Washington to endorse an end to Israel bombing a concentration camp and slaughtering people. So Cori Bush, to her credit, was one of them. And AIPAC rewarded her for her courage by spending $8 million+ to oust her in her seat in Missouri. And they backed someone named Wesley Bell, who is like a former local prosecutor or something. And they won. They won not by a lot, but they won. Wesley Bell defeated Cori Bush. And so here is Wesley Bell going on MSNBC and being asked why he thinks AIPAC put millions of dollars behind him.
The race against Cori Bush was one of the most expensive races in the country this election cycle. You got a lot of support from the American Israeli Political Action Committee, AIPAC, which spent more than $8 million. Why do you think this PAC put so much money into this race?
Well, first and foremost, we know that this PAC supports the entire Democratic House leadership team, including the president and vice president, even the late, great John Lewis. And their singular issue is the American-Israeli relationship. And I believe that it's important that we support our democratic partners around the world, including Ukraine, including Israel. We have a large Bosnian population in this region, and we're going to stand with our Bosnian brothers and sisters as well.
Yeah, AIPAC reminds me a lot of AIPAC, the American Bosnian Political Action Committee. Yeah.
I mean, we've been sounding the alarm about AIPAC for years.
Yeah.
Years, that Bosnian lobby.
Right.
So,
in fact, we're doing
so
a lobby, a follow-up to the lobby by Mearsheimer and Walz called the lobby : AIPAC. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're a progressive, you're not talking about the power of AIPAC. Where are your priorities right now?
That means you're a PEB, progressive except on Bosnians.
Oh my God. I mean, so yes, and he mentions like other Democrats also support Israel. Yeah, other tools of the lobby who've been bought off like you. Yes, correct. Yes. And unfortunately, John Lewis, to his great shame, was one of them, a freedom fighter for rights for Black people in the US, but who totally sold out people struggling for their freedom around the world, including in Palestine. So, but yes, that's Wesley Bell's explanation for why AIPAC chose him. And he, they found someone to buy off. They found their guy, and they won. And it's just so. But on top of like reinforcing the message that if you defend minimal Palestinian rights, you can't run for office in the U.S. They're also reinforcing anti-Semitic stereotypes that like powerful Jewish people control things. So it's like, it's the worst of all worlds. It's so embarrassing. And yet we still can't talk about it critically in U.S. media. Like, remember, years and years and years of fear-mongering about mythical Russian interference. How dare they interfere in our pristine democracy? Here you have a lobby for a foreign apartheid state, literally buying candidates to oust other candidates. And it's all considered to be normal.
It's so disgusting.
Well, all right. Which brings us to the end of this week's Monday Morning. What a great episode. Katie, you're back stateside?
I'm back stateside, yeah. And the show on Tuesday at the Katie Halper Show, youtube.com/the Katie Halper Show, is going to be great. We're talking to Josh Paul, who quit his job at the State Department over its terrible stance on Gaza. And he's one of the people who early on spoke about the sexual abuse engaged in by the Israeli military and covered up by the Israeli military. So really excited to be talking to him.
So that's Tuesday night at the Katie Halper Show, live at what time?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. All right. Our website is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Please go there, support the show, and get bonus content. You keep us going. We're very grateful for it. Thanks for watching Monday Morning. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.